we've got a wonderful session based on academic skills and building success for university. And I'm going to hand over to Jamie and take it away. Thank you very much for doing this.
All right, thanks then. Kieran, if you could launch your presentation and then I'll take control of it. It's just coming up on the screen for me. Ah, yeah, I can see it. Yeah, that's great. So I'm just going to take control. Okay. Can you see the presentation, everyone, in full screen? Because it's a little minimize window for me. Anyone let me know they can see it and hear me? Just open the mic. Can you see it?
All good, Jamie, from me. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. Well, if you were all here yesterday, then you know who I am. If not, then I'm assuming that this is recorded, so you can always look back at it. We are frequently asked, as Sam says, that we're frequently asked for academic skills when it comes to success at university. So we've laid on this special session for you to kind of up your game, really. My name is Jamie. I'm the business librarian, but I do other things as well. I'm the partnership librarian as well. So if you have any issues with the way the partnership works, then just get in touch with me directly. My email is up there on the screen. And if you're in a partner that has Teams, then please do use Teams as well. Right, so without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so I've been asked to talk a little bit about academic success at university. I've been to university a few times. I've worked here for over a decade, quarter of a century as a librarian. So it really is about, the way you go about engaging with your degree program. And the bit that I want to emphasize more than anything else really is the fact that you've got to get your mindset in the right place. Okay, you've got to sort of think, I'm a learner at university. I'm going to own this. I'm going to engage with it. I'm not just going to use Google and not engage with my seminars, etc., etc. So get yourself into the mindset of somebody that wants to get academic success at university. Now, in terms of academic success, we do have plenty of ebooks in the library available on MetSearch. Everything for your course is available on MetSearch. Okay, and on the slide here, there's a few links to some decent guides actually. So do have a read of things like Cottrell's Study Skills Handbook and Brick's Academic Success, because they really do tell you everything really as an overview about how to get those skills to be successful at university. So yeah, as I said with it, academic skills is such a wide-ranging term. It's such a term that's talked about but never often defined. And yeah, as I've said already, it's owning your learning. It's being prepared to treat it as your job, really, as another job if you already have a job. So it's about independent study and preparing for good group work. I've already talked about these. But there are things like communication. Communication is a massive one. Both scholarly communication and in terms of your academic writing, and also communication in terms of learning how to do a presentation and things like that, things that you'll be expected to do in the workplace, okay, as well as things like exam preparation and referencing. We'll come to some of those, perhaps referencing more at the end. Okay, so in terms of sources, so we're talking about academic types of information, and that's really where it begins in many ways. You get given your things to read, so your books and your journals and that sort of thing. So this is what you have to master almost. This is like the core of it. So putting aside engagement and with your colleagues and things like this really is about the sources. So you have to identify the right sources. So much feedback I've seen from previous years has been the wrong use of sources. Okay, things like commercial websites, anything with a .com, even Google Scholar really is not great for various reasons. Okay, and then once you've selected some good quality sources, you then have to make effective use of them. Okay, and I'll just bring up the next little bit, actually. So making effective use of sources is quite hard, actually. It's a bit of a skill, to be honest, because you've got to develop what we call criticality, or you've got to think critically about those sources, how the arguments within those sources compare to each other, how they contradict each other, things like their sample sizes, are they valid sources? Certainly don't include .com websites, as we've already said there. So that's a little bit of a hard skill to master, and you have to be quite selective when you're doing it as well. You can't hope to include everything in your essay that's ever been written. So you just got to pick the bits that relate to the question. Okay, right. So, and then I've already said, step number 3 is getting across what you've learned and sort of parading and showing what you've learned to, well, mainly your assessor and your tutor, really. So that means writing clearly with a lot of structure. And as I said already, mastering the methods of communication, things like presentations and so forth. Just gonna have a little drink a bit early in the morning. Okay. At the heart of it, in many ways, is a literature review. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about literature reviews and literature searching, because this is kind of the core of university as far as learning content goes. The literature review cycle follows a basic research cycle. So when you look at, say, a journal article, it always starts with things like an abstract, a summary of the article at the beginning. Journal articles will typically have an introduction, then some form of review of the literature, just setting the scene and placing what you're doing in context, your topic. It'll often have a methodology. So if there was some primary research that somebody gathered, then it would talk about how the selection of methods for conducting the research. And then it moves on to the conclusion where you summarize your work. That's the journal article. But that's the research cycle as well in many ways. And that's what you've just got to get your understanding of, okay? Because a literature review is very, very similar. Writing an essay is very, very similar as well. Okay, so literature review. Literature, we mean research, usually other people's, okay? This can be published in lots of places that you can use. I've already talked about the places you can't in some ways. So journal articles are fine, e-books are fine. We call them third sector reports, so reports by associations that represent particular sectors or professions. They can be okay, but be aware of bias on those as well, because there's plenty that represent employers rather than workers. So you need to get a balance there. Government papers, government studies, they call them monographs, but they mean books. Okay, that's, you know, that's just the posh library word for books there. So that's the kind of literature to include in your work. Now, and the review part is doing a survey, okay, or audit of what's already been written, okay, identifying who the key authors are, and as it says on the slide, you know, it's all about placing your essay question or your presentation in a theoretical framework. So things that have already been written that relate to your question, okay? It locates it in the existing body of knowledge. That's what you're aiming to do with your literature review. Okay. So some features. This is often a quiz that I put out, and you're very welcome to perhaps in the chat you could name one or two of the good things. So there's good and bad on the screen about the features of a good literature review and a bad literature review. So feel free, while I have a little drink, to put in the chat some of the boxes, you know, that immediately occur to you as good or bad things about a literature review. So if you could do that, that would be great. It'll give me a break from talking. I'll give you just 20 seconds. I only want a quick reflex kind of response, if you like. Everyone's very quiet this morning. Oh, Sam's typing. I don't mind that. Irrelevant sources. Yeah, bad. Very bad. And that's the hard part, actually. That's one of the hardest parts of doing a review. It's easy to go off topic or stray from your question. So at all times, be very, very focused on your question. If it doesn't answer the question, don't include it, really. There's no point. You're not trying to impress people by showing the quantity of what you've read. Quality is the key. It's much better to engage with several or 10 sources in a really in-depth way than 50 sources that you don't even reference in your work, really, in you don't even discuss in the main body of your text. Data collection, let's just see that. It's very small on my screen here. Data collection is a thing, okay? I tend to relate it to the validity or otherwise of a methodology and the research you did. There's nothing more frustrating than finding a really great book or journal article and it relates to a very, very tiny sector or a very small sample size, which is so frustrating because it kind of undermines the validity of the work. So be careful with things like sample sizes and exactly what the research is looking at. Yeah, great. In-depth critical evaluation, that's what we want. Lots of goods there. So yeah, thank you. That's brilliant. I'll just give you the answers. Okay, ready for this? Okay, so we want a range of relevant sources. I talked a little bit about the range you can include. You might even be able to do some newspaper articles as long as they're good quality newspaper articles. You certainly can't include another student's research. I know that might seem obvious, but I mean, obviously there are PhD students out there, but PhD students are still students, okay? So you can't quote a PhD student's work, even after they've graduated, because it's still their student work. And you might come across one of their theses, okay? But by all means, you can use it to look at the references that they've used. So you can look at the research that other people have used, and then you follow up those directly. You go to those sources directly, okay? So sometimes you can find decent things, but you have to go to the end source yourself, okay? What else have we got? Evidence of in-depth critical evaluation. Yeah, that's more about sort of, does the article think critically? Do you think critically about the article? Fresh perspective, if not original. It's always lovely if you can bring something new to a topic. And by that, I mean, obviously you're reliant on secondary sources unless you're doing some primary research. But there's there's an emphasis on newness. So keeping things fresh and new, because it will be interesting to the person assessing your work. So you might get ahead of what your tutors know in some ways. So that can be quite nice. But yeah, all the others are to do with limited or irrelevant sources, no reasoned arguments. Some things are far too descriptive and they don't even analyze things. Okay. And yeah, you've got to put your ideas in some lovely structure and order. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not going to talk much more about that. We spent a long time on this slide. Okay. This is just a reminder about the things that you need to do with your literature review. It's about the focus on the question, awareness of the literature, and then something that we call synthesis. I've already alluded to it, but it's bringing those ideas together and how they compare to each other, critically thinking about sources, and then communicating with great clarity. Okay. So that's a literature review. Okay, that's what the review does, that little piece of your research, that block of your research. So now you've got to search for the sources. And this is sometimes referred to as a literature search. I know it sounds quite obvious, but people don't often differentiate those kind of things. So a literature search is a systematic way of looking through sources. I think the emphasis is on a really planned approach to your search. Don't just go running off in any direction. You could frame it along the lines of, I said, a classic research cycle, a summary, an introduction, a methodology if you have it, and what you're trying to prove and that sort of thing. So you could write a little chart for things that you'd like to include in your piece of work along those lines of the classic research cycle. But what I'm really alluding to is that you have to use the right words to search the database. That stands to reason. If you use the wrong words, then you probably won't find anything great. So you're trying to think almost like the database thinks and pull out great things without being overwhelmed by what we call information overload. Okay, let's have a drink. I've already said this. Use only academic sources, Wikipedia, blogs, even well-written blogs. Commercial websites don't impress. Bad referencing doesn't impress. Referencing is just a skill, okay? It's just a technical skill. I think I've got some slides on it a bit later on. I'll talk about it then. And I've already said what you must use. In terms of journals, there are some that are called academic journals. So these are called peer-reviewed journals. Look for that word. Look for peer-reviewed when you're looking in the databases. There's often a little box you can tick to just see the peer-reviewed journals. So yeah, but in that whole world of journals, there's also things called trade journals. Now, trade journals look at things from the point of view of a professional in a job. Okay, so they look at sort of how-to guides. You know, if it was personnel and HR, it would be how to do an interview, or how to recruit somebody. They're not very academic. They're often written with good intentions by other professionals. Okay, so don't use too many trade journals. What we're after is those sort of more academic peer-reviewed journals, and I'll come to that a little bit more in a minute. And databases for your subject. I'll come to the prices, but we pay a lot of money for databases. Just the journal budget we have every year is about 400,000 British pounds. The database budget is between 300,000 and 400,000 British pounds. That's annually, by the way. That's a bit more than a Netflix subscription. So yeah, this is things that you've paid for in very small part. You've contributed to this. And when I say, 1/3 of a million, and I bandy about sort of words like that, I'm talking just this year. So it's a cumulative multi-million pound database called MetSearch that has most of the things that you need to complete your assignments in it. So it'd be absolutely crazy just to go, okay, I'm going to use Google. Don't forget, Google is an advertising company. They're only interested in search to the extent that it helps them learn about you and what you want. So you're the product, okay, with Google. You're not the product with MetSearch. It's the other way around, I think. So do bear in mind that they're only sort of looking at you and reselling your data and things like that. Okay, all right. Now on to MetSearch. So this is what MetSearch looks like. Hopefully you've all seen it before, and it's a good page. It's pretty simple when you get used to it. At the top of the screen, there's a big general search box. It's a general search because there's only a single box. Advanced searches tend to break concepts down into separate boxes, so you might see a couple of lines. But I'm not sure whether I cover that later. There's a help guide in the middle of the screen. At the bottom of the screen, there's an orange box where you can web chat us in the daytime. By daytime, I mean, UK time. So if there's an overlap around about midday or something, certainly with Sri Lankan time, then do web chat us if you've got a question. Right, I think I've got a bit of animation. So this bit here is flashing. That's where you sign in. You have to sign into MetSearch, otherwise you won't get the full number of results, and we won't even know you're a student of Cardiff Met. Okay, so that's why you have to sign in, and you should do that every time you use MetSearch. I know it seems a bit boring and gets in the way of things, but it's essential, and it stops many problems. Okay, The other thing that stops many problems is going direct to MetSearch. So in your browser bar, you can type in metsearch.cardiffmet.ac.uk, and then you go straight to MetSearch. Don't Google MetSearch. That's where things start to go wrong. So go straight to MetSearch and sign in. I just want to draw your attention to the top of the screen. I don't know whether you can see it very clearly. It's very small for me on my slide. But there are things like the MetSearch logo at the very top. There's a new search if you want to start again. There's a journal list, a journal A to Z. That's just our subscriptions in a list. So if you come across a journal on the website or anywhere else, you can see if we've got it. And then there's the database A to Z at the top of the MetSearch screen, top middle. So that's where you access your subject databases. Because don't forget, MetSearch isn't just a library catalogue. It is a portal and gateway to all of that subscribed multi-million-pound content. Okay. Right. Drink. So let's just say I've done a search. Climate change is a good search. It spans all subjects. Sustainability spans all subjects. And this one I've done tourism and climate change, just as a quick general subject search. The bit I want to draw your attention to more than anything else is the thing in the red boxes. So in the results list, and there's only 3 results on the screen, you've got things that are actually tagged and flagged as peer reviewed. So you don't need to, if you see that tag, you don't need to worry if it's quality and if it's academic. That means it is quality academic. And on the right hand side, if you did get tens of thousands of results with your first kind of search, then you can narrow down on the right hand side just to peer reviewed journals. So you only see those. It's also useful a bit further down the slide to narrow down by subject and by date as well, because don't forget, the tutors are looking for something recent. You might have to go back in time. You might have to go back, 10, 20 years, or even more than that if you were looking at, say, mega projects like the moon landing, for example, or the London Olympics. It doesn't matter. You might have to go a bit further back in time, as long as you can justify it. And the emphasis is really on the modern stuff. So we're talking the last 3, 5, 7, and possibly 10 years at a complete maximum. Okay. Right. So just to remind you to narrow down your search and select peer reviewed wherever possible. Okay. Now I've isolated a result here. That what you're looking at here is a book record. It says book at the very top, just above the title, now, and by the picture of the book. And just below that, you have a green link that says online access. So we know it's an ebook because there's book and then online. There's no kind of, it's not giving you any information that there might be a physical paper copy of the books, which wouldn't be any use to you anyway, because we can't post books outside the UK. It's just not something we get involved in there. Okay, so if you click on online access, you see the next part of the slide, which is what we call a landing page. So we're not into the book itself just yet. We're into information about the book. And I'm drawing your attention to the bit in the red box which says availability. Now, it says your university has access to 3 licenses. So that could mean that if more than one of you or more than 3 of you have the book open at the same time, it might say, there's a waiting list. If that's an issue, we get alerted automatically, and we normally buy more copies of the license. Okay. But if it becomes an issue, then let me know. We can see what we can do about it. There are lots of limitations with regard to how long you can download the book for. You can't download and keep it forever. You can only download it for a certain amount of time. And the second thing there is download PDF. Now that is forever. You can download 1 chapter, so make sure it's a good one, from the book just by selecting PDF chapter, and then you can keep it forever. You can keep journal articles forever as well. You just can't download the whole book forever, well, not legally anyway. Okay, so I just want to draw your attention to that. Now, the main way we support your courses, I'd be so grateful if you could pass this on to the students that you represent from the home universe, from the home partners. So grateful if you could let them know this. But not everything is an ebook. Okay, so you'll see your reading list. You'll be given a reading list by your tutor on your Moodle website or your VLE, and there may not be a book, there may not be an ebook for everything on MetSearch. Now, this confuses a lot of people. A lot of students get confused by this. The answer is that not everything is published as an ebook. Okay, so not everything exists as an ebook. Publishers don't allow it sometimes, which is a pain for us because we rely upon electronic books for our international provision. So what to do next there? So if you can, you look in, if there's no ebook for the book that you want that's in your list, then search for, use another book in the same list, in the same reading list. Select another book because it still shows you're engaging with the sources. You could let me know as well if you wanted to, and then I can investigate it to see if there's been an update, to see if there's, if they've brought out a book since we looked at it last time, for example. So please pass on the message that not everything is an ebook. You won't find everything on your reading list in MetSearch. And it's okay to use newer editions and sometimes older editions of books. Don't become completely focused on particular editions of books. Okay, if you find the title, go for it. Any queries, contact your tutor, contact your personal tutor, and they can advise you a bit further there. Okay, right. Oh, this is just I'm not going to cover this in great depth. This is just a little feature that's crept into MetSearch over the last 6 months, and it really relates to peer-reviewed content. You tend to only see these little, they look like traffic signs. There's an up and a down arrow. Now, these mean either that an article has been referred to or it has referred to an article. So it's kind of like a link in a chain of academic publishing. So if the arrow faces up, then there's something newer that has referred to that article. If the article faces down, there's something older that they've referenced in their list. Okay, I know it's a bit confusing, but it can be a way of accidentally discovering relevant content. So I thought I'd include it, but I'm not going to dwell on it. This is what journals look like. Everyone says, oh yeah, journals are more up to date than books, and yet they are, as long as they've been published more recently. Sometimes books are really bang up to date. Trouble with books is there is often a really much longer publishing cycle. So they would take a year to write, and then they would take 6 months to be peer reviewed and that sort of thing. But journals tend to be a much quicker process. They come out every month, every 3 months. So the chances are you'll find something quite nice in them. You can look for journals in a couple of ways. On MetSearch, you type in journals. You just select journal search at the top of the screen. And this is asking for the name of a journal, not a journal article name. So just the name of an actual magazine. And in this case, you might not know the names of the magazines, but you can guess, if I'm looking for something on project management, then I can just type in project and I can see journals with project in the title. That's one way of accessing the content. Okay, so let's have a look at this one. So the top result there is project management journal. It says peer reviewed, so that's great for including in your work. And the green bit, online access, if you select that, you go into the journal, and that's just to assume that I've done that, and then the journal appears essentially. Now, the nice thing about going into journals on your subject is that you don't have to do as much work when you search, and it's a very specific way of searching. So MetSearch might give you tens of thousands of results, but if we're searching in a specific journal, like project management journal, then you're only going to see tens or maybe a few hundred results. So in some ways, it's like the most specific way of searching. And if I was looking in project management journal, remember, if I'm searching within that journal, don't include the word project. You don't need to. It's already assumed because you're in that journal. You can just get on with typing things like case studies or particular names of companies or whatever you want to look for there. There is an app for that, as they commonly say. It's called Browsine, and this has a carefully selected range of journals for each subject. You download it from the iTunes Store or from Google Play, and it's really easy. You just sign in with your ST number and your Cardiff Met password, and then you can see journals on your phone and you can look for the latest editions. It even alerts you when there's a newer edition as well, so you can like really stay on top of your subject. Databases range, there's so many. This is what they all look like. They're all just asking for you to search them effectively. I'm not going to do too much of that today, really. I want you to play with the databases. Okay, just have a quick drink. I'm getting a bit dry. Okay, so if you remember, on MetSearch, the top of the screen, 10 slides ago, you just select database A to Z. And what you'll see is this screen, if you do that, and there's about 120 databases. There's an English alphabet from A to Z at the top of the screen. Those are like jump points in the list. But I'm directing your attention to narrowing down the list of databases to your topic. So if you're doing business, the by subject bit that I've highlighted on the screen is great because you can just select business and management. Now, I want you all to be using these particular kinds of databases. I've just highlighted some of the main ones. Okay. Now, for e-journals, we've got Business Source Premier for business. We've got Sport Discus for sport, Medline for health, Ovid for health, Education Research Complete for those studying any educational programs. And I've already mentioned browsing. Okay, so your homework, really, I don't want to hear back from you, by the way, unless you've got any feedback, but is to look at those e-journal sources via the database A to Z on MetSearch. We've also got market reports. Some of them are sort of, if you're not aware of market reports, it's often the thing that people exclude from their business plan where they should include it. But it talks about products and consumer behavior. So you'll hear it on the radio, car sales are falling, what consumers are doing, and movement towards EV vehicles and things like that. So it gives you a bit of a market information, very visual as well, a lot of infographics, which can help to make your work a bit more interesting. Statista is under S, obviously in the alphabetical list, and it is a global database. Mintel is more UK and European data, so do bear that in mind. Newspaper articles may be okay. Keep them, don't do too many in your work. And we've got two databases. One's called European News Stream. I think it has a bit of global content in there as well. Give it a go for your own countries. And that covers hundreds of newspapers. Now, there is one particular newspaper in the UK called the Financial Times. And this one is not really included in those kind of bigger databases like European News. They've gone their own way, and you have to go to them separately. So Financial Times separate. But we have paid for a subscription for everybody in the UK and in our partner institutions, students, to access Financial Times. And there's details of how to register and access that premium content in the database A to Z. If you get fed up of all of the kind of text that you have to read, or maybe you're better, at English oral rather than English written, then you can look at some video lectures, and we've got some great ones actually. They're fully quotable in your and usable in your assignments. HS Talks and O'Reilly are the two to try there. With regard to referencing, we have a referencing guide called Cite Them Right Online. This is what we use in Cardiff Met. This is our handbook for referencing, and it's under C in the database A to Z, and you can have a look at how to do all kinds of things with all kinds of sources. Last but not least, there's a database called Scopus. It's a research database, and I use it for profiling topics, but I'm not going to really go into much depth today on that, but have a look for yourself and see what you think. So that's the kind of source side of things. I'm now going to talk a little bit more again about academic skills, a bit more. So these are my kind of top 5 things, because you'll see all kinds of ways of being selective. Be selective is what I'm trying to say. We've already talked about, is it relevant to the question? Yeah. Is it new? We've talked about that. Is there something newer? We've talked about peer review and commercial. Don't use them. We use peer review, but don't use commercial, sorry. And then we talked about validity of sample sizes. So I've covered most of those already. Now, this is the being critical side of things. So this is the way you use the content, the way you think about it, the way you compare different theories and models, and the way you engage with the debate, the theoretical debate on your subject. Okay. What do I put there? So application, yep, how you use it, analysis. Yeah, I think I've covered all of these really. So, not much I haven't talked about here really in terms of bringing them together, synthesizing the sources. Do they contradict each other? Do they agree with each other? Is there anything new on the topic? That sort of thing. You can read that slide. It's in your own time really. Okay, this is just a reminder to be selective when looking for quality sources. It also helps with identifying information you need for your references as well, actually. So what we're looking at here is a journal article. And so the first thing I do when I look at a journal article, I look at the title. If it's not relevant, I move on to something else. Your time is precious. If the title's relevant, then I move on to what they call the abstract. And the abstract is a summary of the item. So I have a quick look at that. If that's not relevant, I move on. Okay, so you don't have to read the whole article to get a sense of the article. Okay, just get a basic sense of the article. And we already talked about currency. Currency means when it was published, and it's in very small print at the top of that journal article. So there's some of the things you can do to A, read journal articles really quickly by looking at the title and the abstract, and B, you can get that kind of data you need for your reference there. And very often, if you're looking for authority on a subject, so if you're looking for experts, they'll have little biographies somewhere in the article, and you can check those people out. Sometimes they just give everything away, as they've done in this one, or they might just have a name, but you can look them up in their particular universities and see if they're good academics, if you like. Okay, if they're credible, believable. Now, referencing is something everyone gets wrong unless you've learned the skill. And learning the skill involves practice. Practice, practice, practice. And it's just a technical skill. Don't let it frighten you. Don't let it, do anything to you emotionally. It's really just, it's all laid out for you, okay? But why it's so important, why they devote 5 to 10% of your grade or deduct it from your work is because of those three things, really. It's to highlight the sources you've used, show that you've used them effectively, and help other people follow your line of research. So it's to help other people read what you've read because they're interested in your subject. Let's just assume they're interested in your subject. Okay. Everyone talks about plagiarism. It is not about plagiarism. The true meaning of referencing is about acknowledging the sources that you've used. Okay. Plagiarism often happens unintentionally. Okay, you've got to learn to paraphrase things and put things in your own words. I realize that can be really hard if English is not your first language. Okay, so that's why you reference. And the reason why people are so picky and about referencing in a particular way, every full stop, every space, every bracket counts in your reference, because you're trying to make it, as with everything you're writing about, as easy to read and find as possible. Okay, it's a form of scholarly communication, and as I've said, scholarly communication is really important. Now there are two bits to referencing. The first one is an in-text citation, and this is where something like Harvard gets its name from. So as you can see here, an in-text citation is put in the text of your work. Because it's really in your text, you have to not get in the way and stop the reader. So that's why you don't put the full reference in there, okay? Because you want people to carry on reading nicely. Imagine if you had to slow down and read everyone's full reference whenever anyone talked about something. You'd never get anywhere. So the in-text citation is a short form author and date. And that's why a Harvard style is sometimes called author date. Now, the end of your work, so maybe the end of your, I don't know how you've been told, but the end of your chapter or the end of the final end of your work will include your full reference list, sometimes referred to as a bibliography. And this is where you have to put the full reference. Okay, you put in exactly as it appears there for a book, to be honest. So this is a book by something Northedge. So it's Northedge, comma A, full stop. All of those bits are important. Space, open brackets, date, close brackets, space, and then the name of the book in italics with capitalized G's and S's and G's for guide, full stop, and then it's a town, not a country. So in this one is a sprawling metropolis somewhere in the south of England, here in the UK, Milton Keynes, colon, and then who published the book of the Open University. Okay, and then full stop at the end. And it has to be in that depth. Okay, I can see Sam writing, so I'll just have a drink and see what he's going to say. I know I haven't got long left. Enjoyed the MK reference. Yeah, I know. If you're from Milton Keynes, I apologise. Okay, so that's the way it should look. Yeah. Now, we've already talked about Cite Them Right online, and that is full of fact sheets about how to reference everything and everything and anything you might come across out there. But we've also got a really good website that focuses in some ways, well, on three things. It focuses on the library, it focuses on IT, and it focuses on academic skills. So just drawing your attention to the website, which is called study.cardiffmet.ac.uk. Academic skills is the bit to look at, and I've selected that on this particular slide. It's a screen print. Down the left-hand side to the bottom left, it says academic skills, about us, information for staff, and then it talks about particular skills. Referencing, thinking critically, academic writing, academic studying, presentations, research. All of these things are academic skills, okay? That's the whole body of what you need to apply what you've learned in academia. And there's fact sheets for everything there. There's lots in there, so do have a look at that. The fact sheets look like this, assessing your own writing style, writing with purpose, structure, and clarity. Let's get rid of that. Okay. There is also a Moodle module that I'm not sure you can get access to outside the UK, but you can try. I mean, search for what we call Study Smart. Now, this has videos on how to write really structured sentences and things like that. If it becomes an issue with accessing it in a partner way, then let me know. We can see what we can do about that. Sticking the content in a more accessible place. But there are videos. Study Smart is an open access Moodle module based on our UK Moodle. And yeah, it's written by the academic skills team. And as I said, there's a video and exercises for nearly everything. Okay. Oh, right. I think that brings us quite nicely to the end. If you want to contact us, then as I said, you can drop me an email directly. You can do web chat. If I'm not around, if it's a weekend, we don't work weekends, okay? So I know that I could almost be, every day of the week, 9 to 5, whatever. So on the weekends, you could drop me an email, wait till Monday, or you can just email library@cardiffmet, and then that'll ensure it's picked up, say if I'm on holiday or something like that. That's it from me, Sam. Just questions really now.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Really fantastic session. Has anybody got any questions for Jamie? A comprehensive overview of the skills and developing skills that you need to be successful at university. Some really interesting things that I actually need to take into for my own prof doc work as well. Has anybody got any questions? Gardy, I can see you writing. You can use your mic if you'd like to, buddy. Okay, fantastic. Yeah.
Okay.
As I said, all of these slides will be put onto our website at the end of probably at some time next week, once we've just got them all together, and all of the recordings as well. So it's a really good place, an archive. So if you can't access them now, they will be there for you in the future. And Jamie's talk hopefully will be there for all the ages of your for your development through Cardiff Met. So yeah, thank you all for attending today. A small group, but also engaging group as well. And sometimes we get better from a smaller group. Halima, yeah, we've got a little. Is that a question or just a superb session? Yeah, okay, yeah, some fantastic feedback. And no, so thank you, Jamie. Massive thanks from us for doing a double session for us this year.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss Chris Evans. Obviously,
Yeah.
yesterday you'd see that was his kind of swan song, his final contribution. But I'm on my own for a little bit until Mark becomes online. My main thing for the students here is to pass on what you've learned. Don't keep it to yourself. Just talk about it really to other students. Got to get that message across.
Definitely. And please access those academic skills sessions that are being put on. They are fantastic resources. They're free and they are there for you as international students as well. So please use that website if you get an opportunity. Thank you, Jamie. And thank you for all for attending today. We are back tomorrow, 9 a.m. If anybody needs any links for tomorrow's sessions, we've got 2 sessions and that is the last day. So thank you again and cheers, Jamie.
Cheers.
Take care all.
Bye.
Thank you very much.